Now for our story. When Paul Cromwell went to Wakefield to see Kit Meade, he'd anticipated this reunion would be the final episode before Kit finally became his wife. Kit had promised to divorce Bill Meade and marry Paul, at the time when he'd helped her to gain possession of Lisa Fenner's baby son. But in Wakefield, Paul had learned of Kit's deception, had discovered that instead of suing Bill for divorce, Kit intended to contest the divorce, that she never had intended to keep her promise. And so when Paul returned to Chicago, the love he'd felt for Kit had turned to another emotion, something very close to hate. He was determined to make Kit suffer for having made a fool of him, and the means to do this was easily within his grasp. Lisa Fenner. Yes, through Lisa, he could make Kit regret her trickery. He had telephoned Lisa to arrange a meeting in her room at the hotel, and now Paul stands before her door waiting for an answer to his knock.
Hello, Lisa.
Oh, come in, darling. Oh, I hope you'll forgive my being in this house coat. I've been resting.
Quite all right, Lisa.
Well, Paul, was your trip to Wakefield successful? You look rather tired.
Successful? Yes, I suppose it was.
I mean, did you see Kit? Make the arrangements.
I certainly did see Kit.
And the baby. Did you?
No, Lisa, I didn't see the baby.
Oh.
But I've some news about the baby for you.
Nothing wrong, is there? The baby isn't ill.
No, Lisa, apparently there's nothing at all wrong with the baby's health.
Then what is it, Paul? Tell me. Oh, I've had such an odd premonition while you were gone. A feeling that something had gone wrong.
Well, your premonition wasn't too far off.
Oh, Paul, please, don't torture me. If anything happened to the baby, I couldn't stand
Now, don't get excited, Lisa. The baby's all right. I'll tell you everything. But it's rather a long story, and I'm afraid it may be something of a shock to you. However, it's time you knew it. Now, please try not to become hysterical.
Oh, yes, Paul, yes. I know how you hate things. You've told me so many times it runs through my head like a refrain.
Oh, you make me sound very unreasonable.
Paul.
No, Lisa, on second thought, I guess I am. However, you won't have to suffer from it much longer.
What do you mean by that, Paul?
I mean, my dear, that I've treated you very shabbily. And I think when you know just how much of a scoundrel I've been, you'll consider yourself well rid of me.
Rid of you? Paul, I don't understand.
You will, in a moment. It's not a pretty story I'm going to tell you, but it's too late now for beating around the bush, so I'm going to give it to you straight.
Please do, Paul, whatever it is.
Lisa, I've been dishonest with you. I've lied to you.
Oh, Paul.
I don't love you. I've never had the least intention of marrying you.
Paul, you don't mean that. How could you say the things you said, the plans we
Just
made?
so many lies. They were all part of a deception, nothing but pretense.
But why, Paul? Was it Kit?
Yes, Lisa.
I should have known. I think I did in my heart. Yes, it was Kit all the time.
Yes, Lisa. And was is right.
What?
It's not Kit anymore.
But then I don't understand. You mean you're not in love with Kit? That's not the reason.
Lisa, Kit and I had a pact. We made a bargain. She promised to do something for me if I did something for her.
Yes, Paul?
But the catch is, Kit didn't keep her promise.
Oh.
I kept mine, but I'm breaking it now.
Paul, was I part of this pact?
Frankly, Lisa, my job was to help Kit get possession of your baby and to pretend to you that you and I would be married later. I was to keep you contented until the baby was legally Kit's.
Oh, Paul. And all these months you've let me think.
I know. It was a miserable thing to do. I won't make it worse by asking your forgiveness.
To think that when Kit lost her own child, I felt responsible. Thought it was my fault that she went out that night after I'd made the scene. Accused her of wanting you. When all the time I was right. Kit did want you.
That's the ironic part of this whole mess. Because Kit didn't want me.
Then
Kit
what?
wanted only one thing, your child. That was where I was taken in. I thought she wanted me, too.
Oh. If So ugly. Broken promises, lies, deceit. Paul, what was the promise Kit made to you, the promise she broke?
Kit promised to divorce her husband, Bill Meade. Promised she'd come to me if I helped her get your baby. Now I find out instead of trying to get the divorce from Meade, she's contesting it. In other words, she's played the same trick on me which I intended to play on you.
I suppose I ought to hate you, Paul, but I don't. I just feel dead, numb. Except for my baby. Paul, I've got to have him back.
Of course you do. You should. That youngster at present is the center of the dispute between Kit and her husband. Naturally, he thinks the baby's his own. He wants custody of it. And Kit refuses to give up.
Paul, are you sure the baby is well taken care of? Help me.
Oh, yes. As to that, there's nothing to fear at the moment. I understand Kit's father, Ben Calvert, brought a trained nurse from Chicago to take care of them. But if there's a custody suit, well, it wouldn't be good for the child, whatever happened.
To think that my main reason for giving my baby to Kit was so I'd be sure he'd have a good home. A complete home with security, all the things he should have.
Well, the way things are now, Lisa, the child doesn't stand a chance of having a normal home life. Unless something very drastic happens, your baby will be brought up by Kit, who'll probably hate it because it failed to achieve what she wanted. Or by Bill Meade, who naturally doesn't know the first thing about children, as far as I know.
That's not going to happen.
I'm afraid I don't see how it can be avoided.
I can. Because I'm going to Wakefield. I'll take him back. All these months that I've longed for my baby fought against my feelings for him. I kept telling myself he was better off where he was, in a good home. Now that's all changed. I don't need to fight anymore. Kit will have to give my baby back to me.
Yes, Lisa, if you demand your child back. Kit can't do a thing. She has no legal claim. She never has had. That was why she was so anxious to get the legal adoption papers drawn up.
Well, it's too late to get them now.
Yes, it is if you insist. But I warn you, Lisa, Kit's a very tricky person to deal with. Witness the fact that she made a very fine monkey out of me. And as you've learned, I'm pretty much interested in taking care of myself.
You're completely selfish. But at least, Paul, you've been honest with me today. No matter how I feel toward you now, I appreciate it.
No, Lisa, let's face it. My honesty today didn't spring from a desire to be honorable. I had a selfish motive for telling you the truth.
Oh, it doesn't matter. The personal issue means nothing to me now. I think I've feared all along that something would go wrong between us, that we'd never have the life together that I dreamt about at first. Now it all seems trivial. I haven't enough emotion left to hate you.
I almost wish you did.
No, I don't hate you. I just feel a sort of weary contempt.
Oh, there's one more thing, Lisa. I may be a scoundrel, but I'm not completely contemptible. I know that you're in rather an awkward spot financially, and I want you to...
Paul. No, I don't want anything from you.
Now, Lisa, be sensible. I've never had any intention of leaving you stranded or helpless.
I'll manage somehow.
I understand your feeling, but after all, your main consideration, as you've said, is your child. To recover your baby.
It's the only thing that matters to me.
Well, then don't you see, Lisa? You'll need money. Money to live on in the meanwhile, and to establish. To care for the baby properly. Here, Lisa. Remember, it's not for yourself. It's for your child. When you recover him from Kit.
Paul Cromwell slipped the check into the pocket of Lisa's housecoat. And at Lisa's quick motion, as if she intended to thrust the paper back at him, he rose quickly and went out. Lisa sat motionless a moment. She didn't want his money, hated the thought of accepting it under the circumstances. But then she thought, what Paul said is true. I do need money for my child. Because whatever happens, I'm going to get my baby back. I must. Now for our story. Paul Cromwell's man, Max, sat by the window of Cromwell's room in a Chicago hotel, looking down on the busy early evening traffic. It was very cold outside, but nevertheless, Max had the window open a bit. Though he'd lived in America many years, he'd never become accustomed to the blasts of heat in which Americans seem to be most comfortable. Besides, the cold stream of air coming in from outside gave him a pleasant nostalgia, reminding him of the drafty corridors of his family home in the old country. In his reminiscent mood, Max allowed his thoughts to drift aimlessly, reviewing the many years he'd spent with Paul. The two had been together so long that their relationship was far more intimate, more comradely than was typical. And yet, Max retained a certain reticence. There were some things he hesitated to say. Now, while he waited for Paul to return from his visit to Lisa Fenner, Max was thinking,
He's been gone more than an hour. I imagine he's having an uncomfortable time of it. Mrs. Fenner will scarcely accept his news calmly. Yes, I'm afraid Mr. Cromwell is rather a desperate, unhappy man at the present moment. In a way, though, he deserves to suffer a bit. Have a few bad moments. This was bound to happen. One could see it coming when we were all in Malibu. Mrs. Meade, Mrs. Fenner, two beautiful women with such different minds. There's a sort of poetic justice in it, too. Mr. Cromwell sets out to deceive one of them, while the other sets out to deceive him. I knew from the first that something would go wrong, but Mrs. Meade was determined to take Mrs. Fenner's child. Mrs. Fenner was sure to regret it from the beginning. I think deep within, she's never relinquished her claim to her child. And Mrs. Meade has no real affection for it. But it was enough reason, and now it revealed itself. Poor Mrs. Meade, taking another woman's child, trying to hold her husband's love by such deception. Oh, Mr. Paul.
Well, Max, that's that. You might as well begin packing.
I have packed, Mr. Conwell.
Oh, anticipating as usual. And as usual, correct, eh, Max?
My intuition told me you'll be leaving soon.
Yes. Well, if we're packed, as you say, then the next problem is reservations.
In which direction are we traveling this time, Mr. Conwell?
I think we'll go home, Max. Philadelphia. Max, if you ever see me letting myself in for a similar catastrophe, stop me somehow, please.
I'll try, Mr. Conwell. But if you remember, my efforts along that line were somewhat unpopular during our recent maneuvers.
Yes, I know that. But next time I promise to listen to you. If it's necessary, I give you full permission to beat me over the head with some blunt instrument, anything, to make me realize the danger.
I only hope such extreme measures will not be necessary if there is a next time.
Which I doubt very much. No, Max, I think between them, Lisa and Kit have convinced me that I'm not equipped for such a struggle.
And yet, Mrs. Fenner particularly can hardly be called an aggressive type of woman.
Oh, she's far from it, Max. But Lisa has her own sort of strain. Today, when I told her the truth, that I never intended to marry her, she somehow put me at a disadvantage.
Perhaps, Mr. Conwell, it was not Mrs. Fenner who put you at a disadvantage. Perhaps it was your own conscience.
Yes, I'm afraid you're right again, Max. Worse luck. Lisa behaved with such dignity. She made me feel like a contemptible, cold-blooded scoundrel. Which, of course, I've been.
Unfortunately, it would appear so.
Yes, I know, Max, I know. There's no need to heap hot coals on my head. I haven't the faintest justification for my treatment of that girl, except the fact that I let Kit Meade pull me around by the end of the nose.
Quite, Mr. Conwell.
Yes, and I'm not a schoolboy after all. I ought to have known months ago that Kit was up to something. Lord knows you tried to make me see it in your own subtle way.
In fact, I feel somewhat responsible. Perhaps I should have been less, as you say, subtle and more direct.
Oh, no, Max, it's my own fault, the old story. Wanting something so much that I was blind to the right or wrong of getting it, and finally I didn't care. Oh, I did have scruples originally. I hated to take advantage of Lisa's emotional nature, her love for me. But gradually, Kit had me seeing things her way. And a heartless, selfish way it was, too.
In the end, I think, such a way will not bring happiness to Mrs. Meade. For a time, it may seem to be successful, but finally...
I only hope you're right about that, Max. And I've a feeling you may be. If Lisa goes to Wakefield, goes after her child...
Exactly. In the end, Mrs. Fenner may become the instrument of justice.
That, Max, is something I'd like to see. Kit Meade exposed to the whole village. The contempt of the townspeople, exposed as something very much akin to a child stealer. That would stop Kit. for once.
And, as you say, Mrs. Fenner has her own sort of strength. The strength of a womanly woman who will go to any extreme to protect her child.
Yes, I don't think I'd want to be in Kit's shoes when Lisa arrives in town. But I don't even want to think about it anymore. In the meantime, we have our own immediate problem, the reservations. Look, Max, I have to get a haircut. Suppose you go on down and see what you can do about getting tickets. You may have trouble, but do your best.
Yes, Mr. Conwell.
Good. I'll meet you here in about an hour, then.
And when Paul arrived back at his rooms a little later, he found Max there before him, looking rather pleased with himself.
Back already, Max?
Yes, Mr. Conwell, for some time.
No luck on the tickets, I gather.
Oh, on the contrary. I have reservations for tonight's train at 10:30.
Really? Well, I understood they were very difficult to get.
There's a charming woman in the office. She confessed to a weakness for accents.
Well, good for you, Max. You and Charles Boyer. Did Mrs. Fenner call since you've been back?
No.
I rather expected she would. It's not like Lisa to. I should be grateful, but it worries me.
Was Mrs. Fenner disturbed when you left her?
That's just the trouble. She was almost too composed. Max, you don't think she might do something drastic, do you?
Well, it's hard to say, Mr. Cromwell. But I would advise you to telephone at least. And perhaps you should see her before you leave.
Yes, that's a good idea. Call her, will you, Max?
Very good, Mr. Cromwell. Give me Mrs. Lisa Fenner's room, please.
I hope she's there.
Mrs. Fenner? This is Matt.
Thank heaven.
Excuse me, Mrs. Fenner. Mr. Cromwell wishes to speak with you. Yes, he is Mr. Cromwell.
Thank you, Max. Hello, Lisa?
Yes, Paul?
I just wondered if you're all right.
All right, Paul. Isn't that rather an odd question?
Yes, Lisa, I suppose it is, but you see, I'm checking out of the hotel tonight, and I was wondering if you'd care to dine with me. Our train doesn't leave until 10:30, and...
Thank you, Paul, but I'd rather not.
Lisa, I'd just like to tell you that, well, I think you're taking this thing beautifully.
You do?
You're so calm, composed.
That's because I have no tears left to cry, Paul.
Oh, Lisa,
Please don't say it, Paul. It's too late.
Yes, of course it is. But at least, won't you give me an idea of what you plan to do, where you'll be, and...
Why should I, Paul? I thought you wanted to be clear of all these complications.
But, Lisa, I'd feel much better if I was sure you were going to be all right.
It would clear your conscience if I could reassure you. Is that it? All right, Paul. You needn't worry.
Lisa...
No, you're quite free of me, Paul. Absolutely free. Whatever I do now is no concern of yours.
As Paul hung up the receiver, he felt more puzzled than relieved, despite Lisa's calm assurance that she could take care of herself. Her composure seemed unnatural. Gave him the impression that she had something very definite in mind. Paul was right. Lisa Fenner did have a plan which involved a trip to Wakefield.
Now for our story. Kit Meade had spent an uneasy night. Before retiring, she had taken a sedative, trying to escape from the troublesome thoughts of the previous day. Thoughts brought on by her conversation with Paul Cromwell, when he had revealed that he knew the truth about her. Knew how she had deceived him with her promise to divorce Bill Meade and come back to Cromwell. How she had taken Lisa Fenner's baby in the hopes of restoring her marriage to Meade. Then Paul had threatened to expose Kit. In her dreams, Kit kept seeing the accusing faces of Paul and Lisa, Bill and Peggy, her father and Jessie. She tried to run away, but she couldn't. She was held fast by a baby, which clung to her. Then the baby had started to cry. She was trying desperately to stop his crying when she awoke.
What? Oh, I was dreaming. Oh, Lord, the baby is crying. Why doesn't that woman keep him quiet? She's so blasted efficient. Oh, well, I'll have to see what's the matter. Miss Thorndyke. Yes, Mrs. Meade? What's wrong with that child? Why is he yelling like that? Nothing's wrong with him. Time for his morning feeding, that's all. He's hungry. Well, why don't you feed him? I'm warming his bottle now. For heaven's sake, then hurry up. If I have to listen to that yowling another minute, I'll scream. You must be unduly nervous, Mrs. Meade. It's only natural for a baby to cry occasionally. Well, natural or not, I can't stand it anymore. It seems to me he's always howling. There. Now his breakfast is all ready. See? That's all he wanted. Don't you ever get cross, Mrs. Meade, when you're hungry? Or when things don't go quite the way you want them? What is this, Miss Thorndyke? A lesson in child psychology? I'm only trying to make you understand that your child is as much an individual as you are, Mrs. Meade. A very normal young human being, with the same capacity for emotional responses that you have yourself.
Indeed.
And so, if you've ever noticed that you're capable of being unreasonable, you should hardly be surprised if a baby a few months old is sometimes, too.
Yes, of course, Miss Thorndyke. I'm sure the baby has very good reason to yell sometimes. I've often thought it must be terribly boring to be an infant. Please forgive my barging in like this. I haven't been sleeping well lately, and I flew off the handle.
Why, certainly, Mrs. Meade, I understand. Would you like me to go down and get you a nice hot cup of coffee? I'm sure Lucy has it ready by now. Oh, meanwhile, you can stay here and superintend your young son's feeding.
No. No, thank you, Miss Thorndyke.
It might make you feel a lot better. To tell the truth, I think you're a little shy with the baby, Mrs. Meade. You shouldn't be. He's the sweetest, best-behaved baby in the world. If only you'd get to know him.
On the contrary, I know him quite as well as I want to.
Well, Mrs. Meade, if you'll excuse me, I have some things I must do. Unless there was something you wish to tell me.
Oh, nothing else. I think we understand each other now.
Yes, I think we do. I was thinking it's such a nice day, I might take the baby into town if it's all right with you.
Oh, anything. Anything at all. Just so long as he's not making a racket.
Oh, you poor motherless little baby. Not motherless, but I almost think you'd be better off if you were.
Several hours later, Miss Thorndyke appeared on Wakefield's main street wheeling the luxurious tram Ben Calvert had bought his little grandson. The baby gurgled happily, pleased at the unusual excursion. They made their way down the street to the courthouse square, where Miss Thorndyke parked the tram in the sun and sat down on a bench. Now she gently moves the buggy back and forth while she looks about her.
It's such a pretty little town. It's exactly how I'd expect a small American town to look. The courthouse, the main street with the corner drugstore, the elite cafe, the hotel. Yes, it is a good place to grow up, especially with all the material advantages this youngster has. And yet I feel sorry for him. Poor little tyke. A luxurious big house on 11th Street is more of a prison than a home. It's a cold house. Cold, empty.
Well, hello there, fella. You're looking mighty cheerful.
He's pleased at being outside. This nasty weather we've been having lately.
Oh, yeah. A guy likes to get out in the fresh air once in a while, doesn't he? In the fresh air once in a while, doesn't he? In the fresh air once in a while, doesn't he? In the fresh air once in a while, doesn't he? Excuse me, but this is Mrs. Meade's baby, isn't it?
Why, yes. Yes?
Well, the reason I asked was, the fact is, I'm the baby's father.
His father?
Yeah.
Oh, Mr. Meade. So you're his father.
Yeah. I don't wonder that you're surprised. Hey, I won't get you into trouble, will I? Standing here talking where everyone can see us.
Well, I don't know what you mean.
I had an idea that maybe you've been forbidden to let me see him. You see, I'm not very popular around the Calverts.
Oh. Well, I've never had any special instructions, Mr. Meade. We haven't been able to get out much, as I said, so I suppose it didn't occur to anyone that we'd be likely to meet.
Oh, maybe so. Anyway, I'm awfully glad we did meet up. Gosh, he's grown a lot.
He certainly has. He's going to be a big boy.
He is? Can you really tell at his age?
Oh, yes. Well, you can tell a lot by the size of his hands and feet, the general bone structure. Yes, I think he's going to turn out very much like his father and Bill.
Well, I only hope he isn't all brawn and no brains like his dad.
Mr. Meade, I hope you're exaggerating. No, you needn't worry about your son. He's a very smart baby.
Oh, gosh, that's swell. Of course, he looks awfully smart to me, but then there's just a chance I might be prejudiced.
The proud parent? Oh, don't feel self-conscious. You have a right to be proud.
Yeah, I'm proud of him. But so far, I haven't been much of a father to him. I'm glad he isn't old enough yet to notice things, know the difference.
Well, he is old enough to respond to affection, Mr. Meade. Or to notice the lack of it.
He is? Gosh, that's been bothering me. Miss Thorndyke, does he feel any lack of affection at home? I mean, from Mrs. Meade?
I wish I could answer that without being unethical.
Yeah, that's the hitch.
I'm sorry.
Oh, that's all right. I understand the spot you're in. It's just that I have the kid on my mind so much of the time, and I feel so helpless. His future...
Well, Mr. Meade, perhaps I shouldn't say this, but I think that you're right to be worried. I've thought a lot about it myself. You see, you can't help getting attached to a youngster like this when he's in your care. What sort of childhood will he have? What sort of adolescence? The material security, the big house and fancy schools alone don't make happiness. We know that.
Yeah. Look at him now, sound asleep. It makes you feel funny knowing how dependent they are, how helpless.
Would you like to pick him up, Mr. Meade? You'd be surprised how heavy he is.
Oh, but won't I wake him?
Oh, it's all right. He's had his real nap. This is just an extra siesta he's taking.
Come here, boy.
That's right. Oh, support his back with your arm. His little neck is still pretty wobbly. There.
Gosh. Hey, he feels a lot different than the first time I held him. But he's still awful small.
As Bill held the baby carefully, looked tenderly into his face, he was thinking,
My son. I've got to take care of you, little guy. See that you have love, security. You won't get it at the Calverts, I know that. And this Miss Thorndyke made me realize it all the more. I've got to think of a way somehow. I've got to get you away from there and give you a real home life. And I will, fella. I don't know how, but I'll manage some way if it's the last thing I do. I know Kit doesn't really love you. And Ben thinks of you as something to own, a piece of property. It's no place for you, no place at all. No, you're going to get the breaks. I'll see that you do, no matter what. Somehow it's going to be you and me together.
Yes, Bill, you want the breaks for your son, but there are obstacles you can't foresee standing in your way. How would you feel, Bill, if you were to learn that the baby boy for whom you feel such paternal affection is not, as you believe, your son, but the son of Lisa Fenner, a woman you've never met?